So what we're going to be talking about today is how great spaces like this actually impact how we're working. So every good story starts with once upon a time, so why not start my presentation as the same? How about I move this up? I'm a bit taller than some. So this photo you'll actually notice is taken from where you are sitting today, and this is our CEO, Chris Buckingham, and our General Manager of Finance. And this is a meeting that they're actually having quite a serious meeting. But you notice where they're sitting. In the open, they're using the spaces around them because they knew the meeting that they were having was important to be open and creative. They needed their mind space, they needed their cognitive functions to be acutely aware of the surroundings and what the discussions they were having. So they chose the meeting space based on their topic or on the task or work that they were completing. And this is something that we're forgetting. We're very, very quickly moving to working from home, activity-based working, or just working in a cafe. But what we're not actually doing is planning out our tasks and our days, and then matching the locations of those functions to meet the requirement. And this is what we actually want to start looking at, and it's saying, well, if I'm going to be working in a very intensive trying to create a new piece of content or try in creativity, or I need to focus down and write that board report so that I don't have a board director asking me too many questions, I'll choose the location based on the work we're doing. And if you ever get a chance to have a tour of Bunjil Place, you'll see how much of that is actually enacted. You've got the library space where council officers or library officers will actually use the space to have meetings. You also have closed in a very nice nooky room which is actually complete silent. You have to have your phone turned on. You can't even have it on vibrate. It has to be completely no sound at all before even entering the space. You also have meeting rooms. You have activity-based working stations, but it's about trying to actually pick the location that you're working based on the function that you're trying to achieve. So how do we do this? Now, I can give you some very quick clues in terms of what works for me, but what works for me is not going to be what works for you. If I need to do some self-reflection, or if I need to look internally in terms of how I handle a situation or how I'm going to deal with it and strategize how I'm going to deal with the situation, the best place for me is actually out in nature. Go for a walk in a park, go for and get into that open spaces. Now that doesn't mean I go to a forest. I don't think the last time I was in a forest was several years ago with the kids, but it means that getting out and so I'm out in the fresh air, and yes, sometimes it'd be good out in the rain as well. But if I was working on a task that really wanted to stress my creativity, and you'll find me on these very desks, these very seats, or at any of the libraries in the case you get in your region, sitting on the floor, just actually in the open space, finding that creativity, finding the energy that comes from being around people. I know that Monday when I come in, the very first place I'm going to be sitting is a very nice tucked-in office in one of the back rooms in the Civic Centre, because I know that I need to get this report out by 11 o'clock. And choosing those spaces, choosing those functions, because that's what I need for that, is what I need. That is not what you need. So it's about recognising the functions you're doing, and when you are undertaking those, was this the best place for this function? And once you do that once or twice, you'll actually start noticing that, okay, well, next time I'm not going to try and write a report right here when Tiny's time is on, because then my report starts to reflect some of the kids' stories that are being read out. No joke, that's happened. So how do we start building that efficiency? And doing that self-reflection is important, but understanding, and some of you might already know it, the holy trinity of three in terms of speed. You can do something fast, you can do something that is high quality, or you can do something that is cheap. You can only ever have two. If you're doing something that is fast and high quality, it's going to cost a lot. Now we can actually mock this up. We can actually say, and fast food and restaurants are very, very good at preparing. So for instance, for a high quality restaurant, they've actually sometimes get the cost down. We can have a debate on if they've done that. but they'll focus on speed and quality, but their costs are actually maintained by preparing everything beforehand. We didn't go up to them and ask them, I want this delicious steak that they've had to prepare 79 hours to actually have ready for me. They've done all that prep work and everything's ready for me to actually utilise. So it's about understanding these different levers when we're undertaking a task and really applying how those levers are going to play into the meeting or into the role we're undertaking. So when you're going through some of these tasks, stop and think, where did I actually do this best? Was it because I was sitting at a desk, or was it because I was sitting in a meeting room? Was it because I had people around me, or was it because I had total and utter silence? There are functions and tools and technologies we can use now. There's some things that we've got coming to the libraries, for instance, mindset headsets, which not only provide noise cancelling, because a lot of the work that we've been doing in the libraries over the last 2 years and before was actually opening up the spaces and making these communal spaces that everyone can come to. But then you do have people that are coming here for silence. And unfortunately, libraries don't have that anymore. So how do we actually empower that? We've got these mindset headsets coming, which are actually noise cancelling, but then we'll have ECG in the band, so it actually monitors your brain waves while you're doing it. I'm not joking, I've been testing it out, it's quite fun. So when you're actually going through, using these functions, and when I've been going through this, I've actually changed some of my working habits, because now I can get the creativity of having people around me and having the visual engagement without the auditory distraction. So I can actually do more functions than I was expecting by using technology not to solve my problem, but to enhance what I was doing. So this comes into what breaks our efficiencies. This is just as important, because a lot of the time we don't realise what distracts us. For me, it's YouTube, it's videos. I cannot watch a TV series and do work. It just doesn't happen for me. Yet my wife, that's how she operates. It's called Holly watching, because it's Holly watching something while she works. I listen to music. So I love having music, and it can have words and it can have instrumental, but I know the functions and that are operating on me when that is happening. So I understand what music I need to play when I'm with the work I'm actually undertaking, which then adds to the atmosphere, adds to the environment that is around me. Why I chose this image is because there's actually no such thing as multitasking. Anyone that says there is actually fooling themselves. When we are multitasking, it's like juggling a ball. You've got one task you're doing, you then chuck that up in the air, and you let that, and your brain then focus on the next task. You catch that, you do what you need to do with it, you chuck that back up in the air. Our brain's cognitive functions are actually stopping and focusing on one thing at a time, and we're switching between it. That's not a bad thing. We need to be able to do that. That is the form of multitasking that our brain is capable of doing. And that's what we should be embracing. We can multitask. But understanding that if we have someone walk up to us and distract us, well, we're probably already distracted. We're looking for that reason to drop the balls. We're looking for the reason to move away from what we're doing. We just blame them because it's easier than looking at ourselves and saying, well, I didn't choose the right location. I was trying to do too much at one time. So understanding the different functions that we're doing and saying, well, what does distract me? I know videos distract me, so I will not have any videos up on the screen. If I need to have a video, I'll actually put it in my schedule and push it to the location I need. But people don't actually distract me. I get a lot of, as an extrovert, I get a lot of energy from people. So being around people, I know that actually works really well for me. And it's not going to distract me from the task I'm at hand. What it might mean is that they're talking to me and they're not actually, what they're talking to me about is not actually hitting home. But most of my staff, most of my family all know this, that if you want my attention, you need to actually have my attention. So this is part of the whole process. If we're going to be in an open environment, make sure people around you know how you're working in that environment as well. That doesn't mean you have little stop signs and trinkets around your computer. That can be fun, but it can also just be having a conversation and getting people to understand that if I'm working in that open space and I engage with you, then obviously I'm engaged with you. But if I'm working in that open space and I'm engaged in my computer, you're going to need to draw me away from that if that's needed. So how do you make shift happen? Well, we need to actually look. I've got a very warped sense of humour, if that's not apparent. So if we actually stop and look at the spaces around us, public libraries are a great space. We have free Wi-Fi. We also have public computers. We also have studio PCs. So these are high-end graphical computers. So we have functions and features that you would not be able to have access to at home. Very soon we'll have those mindset headsets that you can actually borrow and sit in the space and tune everything out. But look at these spaces. You've got these in cafes. We've been doing that for 40, 50 years, using the cafe as the local meeting spot and having meetings. So look at those spaces and start planning that out. Recognise and maximise the efficiencies. So understand what works well for you and use those to your advantage. The same within the distractions. Recognise we always have to have distractions. I'm not saying don't have distractions. Distractions are good. Our brain does need them. But recognise them and put them into an appropriate timing. And one that I didn't put on here is actually this, what I call the science of timing. So this is by, there's a book, I wouldn't be in a library and not recommend a book. So our first book to recommend is When by Daniel Pink. It's the science of timing. It's an amazing book that actually gets you to think about when are you working at your best. And he talks about 3 different bird styles. Are you an early riser, a lark, or are you a late bird? Are you an owl? Or are you in between, where you actually go between, where you can actually wake up early and then stay up late? But that book is such an important read because it's very weird for me to go having a conversation about choosing the space and then talking about when. But until you decide when you're going to be performing the functions, you can't actually decide where you're going to perform those functions. So plan out your day and go, I'm going to be working on this. Where do I need to work on to get the best out of that? So you can choose the location once you've picked the time. The second book that I recommend is Quiet by Susan Cain. And this is a book on the power of introverts. Now, it might sound weird, an extrovert talking about the power of introverts, but there are a lot of introverts in our society. We are a very extroverted society, but Quiet is a book that actually helps you understand the mediums that we actually communicate over. So if I was actually having a meeting where, if I was getting a big group put together in a meeting, that meeting should actually be focused on getting people on board, not about having brainstorming. If we want a brainstorming idea, then that's when we use Teams for CCL or an online digital meeting space, because that's actually where it's most efficient. Creativity happens when we're able to self-reflect and internalize and then come up with those ideas, and digital format means that even the most shy people will actually be able to use that. So to bring this all together, and I've probably already gone over time, but to bring this all together, we actually want to start looking at the new spaces, looking at your libraries, looking at your cafes, looking at the local park and how you're actually going to utilise those spaces. For my reviews with a lot of my staff, we will go on a walk, because there is nothing worse than sitting opposite someone in a desk and trying to actually say, how have you been performing? Whereas if we're sitting or walking around the park and having a conversation, it's a genuine conversation we all can get involved in and actually get that understanding. So if anything else, think about where you're doing, what function you're trying to achieve in the objective, and then you choose the location based on that objective. Thank you.